Hey there, welcome to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm Sammy, your host, and thank you so much for joining me today. If you're like me, then you may or may not have heard of this term, but today we're talking about intrapreneurship. And so when RJ Grimshaw, my guest for this episode, when he brought this topic to me, I was very intrigued because it wasn't something that I had heard a lot about. And so I wanted to learn more and thought that we could learn together. I had so much fun with this conversation. He has some great insight and just some great aha moments for me. I'm curious about what some of yours are, but great aha moments about just kind of the way we function as a team. How do we bring people together? How do we use that in order to really scale and grow and better serve our mission and our cause? So I hope that you take a listen, and then I hope you take some time to reflect within your team. Who's on your team that might be an intrapreneur, and how can you maximize on that and really help build and scale your organization and really just reach your goals and exceed them. So I'm really excited about this episode. RJ Grimshaw is the CEO and president of Unify Equipment Finance, which he grew from 13 million to 80 million in 2 years. RJ sits on the board of the Equipment Leasing and Finance Association. So he talks a lot about some for-profit stuff, but a lot of nonprofit examples as well. And I want to just say this can really be a good conversation for those of you that are in the startup phase, for those of you that are growing your teams, for those of you that are really trying to build and scale in a big way. There's lots of really good information in here. So I hope you check it out. I'm going to challenge you to be open to thinking about things in a different way and what that might open up for you and your organization. Okay? But before we get into this episode is brought to you by our nonprofit website templates. Now, if you are going into 2022, because we're almost there, and you're saying to yourself, like, man, our website just isn't up to snuff, but we just don't have the budget for it, our nonprofit website templates are here to save the day. These templates have everything you need already built in and will help you with setting up your colors, your logos, get it all loaded for you. So all you have to do is change the copy and the images. You can get a brand new WordPress website up in just 5 days. So head on over to thefirstclick.net/nonprofit-templates to check it out. Just see what they're all about and if it's something that might help get you rocking and rolling into 2022. I cannot believe that 2022 is already almost here. It's so crazy, you guys. So like I said, head on over to thefirstclick.net/nonprofit-templates. Check them out. For now, let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Vidal-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business. Hey, everybody, please join me in welcoming RJ Grimshaw to the podcast today. RJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Sammy. How are you?
I'm doing great this morning. Okay, so we're here to talk today about a term that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of. I just admitted before we started recording today that I had not heard of it. So let's talk about the intrapreneur. Why don't you give us a little insight? What is an intrapreneur and why is this something that we should know about?
Yeah, great question. And it's very common that a lot of people have not heard of this term. Actually, the term has been around since the mid 70s. However, in the world that we live in today and what's really sped up this term in this type of culture within an organization is what we just dealt with COVID over the last 19, 20 months in terms of just the fast-paced change and innovation within organizations. And it's a term that I actually was first introduced to back in the mid 90s by a gentleman by the name of Tom Peters. And he wrote a great book called Reimagine. And also Peter Drucker, who is a outstanding executive leadership management coach guru, refers to the term as well. But over the last couple of years, it's really picked up a lot of publications and more people writing about it, more and more people trying to educate within their company. But an entrepreneurship from a pure definition perspective is just really a person that takes a entrepreneurial attitude and utilizes that within a company. So an example of that is I'm currently the CEO president for an equipment finance company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My entire career, and when I first learned of this word and the definition and the principles and characteristics of it, I immediately identified myself as that. And I work within an organization. However, I have to be someone that implements startup practices, innovation, improvement with limited resources. And that's what drove the term over the last couple of years, is because with what took place in our world, and will continue like that, people are asked on a daily basis to do more and more with limited resources. In the days of just showing up and, doing your job description and not looking for ways to improve have changed. Yeah. Especially where the marketplace that you serve in terms of nonprofits, those type of organizations are extremely valuable. And think about what they just went through over the last couple of years with trying to raise funds and serve the people that they're trying to serve in terms of whatever market they're in. And there's so many great causes. But again, people that do that probably are intrapreneurs because they're taking their own time, right? And a lot of volunteers sit on boards. I sit on a couple boards. And you have to have that type of mindset enabled to drive organizations. And it doesn't matter, Sammy, if it's a small company, a large company, not-for-profit, a sports team, within your family. So it's extremely valuable, one, for the person to identify if they want to be an intrapreneur, as well as an organization to identify these folks that are in your organization because they really want to drive the organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's kind of like the antithesis of, well, this is the way it's always been done.
Correct. Exactly. And that is one of the characteristics. If you're trying to identify if people are looking within their organization, or right now, the war on talent, right? And I shouldn't use the word war, but right now, it's critical to identify people that you want to bring into your organization. And really there's 5 core skills or attributes that when I speak, I talk about that you should look for. One is an ownership mentality. And that is someone that will never make excuses, but they come in and they own what they do. A life learner.
So is that ownership mentality? So that's not just in like your C-suite or your leadership role, but how you look at just people you bring in for
exactly
any role, right? Okay.
Any role. It's not from a leadership perspective where you're leading within the organization or you have the title of leader, but it's someone that you put into a certain role. And for a larger example of that is when we're interviewing candidates for Unify, one of the questions that I always ask someone, or I shouldn't say I ask this question, I make this statement to people that we're interviewing is that I'm a believer in job descriptions. However, we're not a large firm where we have well-defined job descriptions. We're a smaller organization, and we really foster the term of intrapreneurship within Unify. However, what I'll say to a candidate is that if a year from now, if we come together, we decide to have, we want you to join our team and you want to join our team. If a year from now, your job description reads the same exact way as it does today, we probably haven't done our job of fostering that culture, as well as most likely, we just didn't have the right conversations, because an intrapreneur is going to come in and make process improvements. They're going to look at ways to generate revenue. They might bring a different product to light. And I have a prime example of that. We had a gentleman that's no longer with our company. And that is one of the downsides of intrapreneurs. They never sit still. Their mind is always racing. They're always looking for improvement. And that's what drives an intrapreneur. And this person came to me and said, RJ, I really believe that we need this to serve our customer base. And what it was an online payment portal, which we did not have at the time. And I said, well, it's not in our budget. for this year, but we could do it, we'll put it in the budget for the following year. He said, would you mind if I run with it for a little bit? I said, by all means, but I would ask is that you keep me updated on things that go on with this, just so I'm in the loop if I'm asked something from our IT team. Well, lo and behold, and also, Sammy, part of me didn't think that would work, but that from a leadership perspective, when you foster intrapreneurship, you have to have an open mind. You have to allow people to have the freedom to try things. So I let this gentleman try it. And last month we processed $65,000 worth of payments through that portal.
Wow.
And he drove the whole process, and it was not in his job description. However, he identified a need that our customers desired. He drove the process with outside vendors, internal folks. He had to influence these folks, influence the external resources as well, and did not have a budget allocated to do this.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. So, and I could go on and on at different examples of that, but that ownership mentality is that he said, I'm going to own this. I believe in it. And you have to also understand from a leadership perspective that there will be things that people will fail at. However, it's what you learn from that going forward in those experiences. So you allow that freedom. Now, however, as a leader in the organization that's trying to foster this type of culture, you do have to have some barriers, because the last thing you want to do is have someone take on a task or initiative and lose focus on their core job.
Right. I mean, it still has to be in line. I mean, like what this employee was doing for you was really solving a problem that was going to lead to faster payments in cash, right? Like that makes sense. So it's kind of pulling it all together, and how does it match up with what your organization's overall goals are?
Right. And that leads to the next, identified skill is a life learner. So this gentleman is a life learner. So even he was excited just to learn in the process. He was learning about IT. He was learning about setting up the web portal and things of that nature. And then you have to have passion. He has a passion. This particular gentleman has a law degree. He has a business management, degree. So he's always learning. And that's so critical for when you're trying to identify an entrepreneur. And again, the passion to learn. And then also it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, I'm not a risk taker. And that's why I'm not an entrepreneur, right? You have to be a risk taker to be a entrepreneur in terms of going out and starting a business to solve a problem. An entrepreneur is a calculated risk taker. What they're doing is they're taking resources that they can control, and primarily that's their time, and leveraging that within the organization. And from that comes the learnings and things of that nature. So it is again, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about it. And I think it is just so beneficial for organization. And these entrepreneurs are champions within the organization. They're product champions, they're process champions, they're marketing champions, they're innovation champions. And the most important thing, it comes down to this on a daily basis. And Peter Drucker was all about execution. They're implementation champions that drive execution. So did we hit on all 5 of the characteristics that you were looking, or that you look for in the hiring piece? Yeah. So I'll go through them real quick again. Ownership, learner, they're a life learner. They have to have a passion for life, calculator, risk taker, and they're a process or product development expert. And they're always asking why. And it's very critical. It's very important, Sammy, that if someone views themselves as an intrapreneur, for example, I do. So I had to seek out an organization that I knew that this type of mindset would work within. And because it will fail miserably that if you identify yourself as an intrapreneur and you go into a culture that does not promote this, most likely you'll be very frustrated. For sure. And leave the organization. And I can give you an example. I'm another example of that my previous employer, which was very good to me. And I was there during the 08, 09 and the Great Recession and things of that nature. However, during that time, I was very active in social media. I was very active in terms of understanding how we can utilize this. And my boss, who's the chief sales officer for the organization, and this was a publicly traded company, came to me and asked me to stop posting on LinkedIn and stop posting on Twitter and stop posting, in certain areas without a legal review of what I'm saying. And again, all I was putting out there things is to build our brand for the company. Mm-hmm. It was nothing personal. It was all, and I still am very strategic. Well, ultimately I ended up leaving for the current opportunity that I'm in. I've been here for 8 years. Well, my former boss went on to a larger organization, and lo and behold, he called me. We always stay in touch. 5 years later, he said, "Hey, I need you to teach me about this LinkedIn thing and Twitter thing. And I'd like you to come down and speak to my board about it. And we want to really start utilizing social media more." And that just shows you that an example of, if you feel that you don't fit in and you firmly believe in the mission and what you're trying to accomplish, seek out an organization that your qualities fit in the organization's mission.
Well, and I want to ask, because it seems like being an entrepreneur and being an intrapreneur are not exclusively mutual, but are very similar types of personalities. But so if you have, you normally can't have more than one entrepreneur or visionary in a company. So if you're bringing in multiple intrapreneurs to kind of help support, problem solve, grow, scale, and build your organization, how do you kind of allow all of those personalities to meld together without kind of stepping on each other's toes or like having competing, ways to solve a problem? Like, how do you kind of get all of those personalities to work well together?
Well, that's a wonderful point. You cannot have an organization that is full with intrapreneurs. It won't work, to all the reasons why you just pointed out. So there are more and more software programs that are coming out that drive the innovation and drive process development and engagement within an organization that's trying to foster this. And you're going to have, as I mentioned earlier, champions that are going to rise to the top and identify, and leadership can identify those folks. And then they're going to be the people that will drive that innovation or process improvement and champion those initiatives within an organization. So the point being, you cannot have an organization full of entrepreneurs, right? Or intrapreneurs. It's a combination of both. And for example, if 25% of your organization is identified as a intrapreneur, you're fine. That's all you need. You don't want to be, a company of 20 people and everybody or everyone identifying themselves as an intrapreneur, because that will not work, because there will be no progress forward, because everyone has great ideas, right?
Yeah. And so do you think that it's good to also sprinkle in a mix of do you want just your leadership team? So your head of marketing, your head of fundraising, would you want to have all of the kind of heads of departments kind of fit this type of problem solving and entrepreneurial?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it has to be from a leadership perspective, but the leadership has to foster the environment and be open to it. And that's where the leadership starts. I really think, because the leadership at the end of the day, a leader at the end of the day has to be out in front of the company and leading the visionary and the dreamer. Let's be honest, all entrepreneurs, are dreamers. This is the way that I look at it. The entrepreneur is the dreamer, the vision. The intrapreneur is the execution of those dreams and are going to drive that to have that vision work.
Would you say that it's almost similar to kind of the other kind of buzzword term that's out there these days, which is like the integrator? Would you say it's kind of similar to that? Because I also see value in having these types of personalities and styles be not the leadership and be kind of the doers, the people that are actually on the ground, because then the leadership can say, yes, this works, this fits, and they can kind of make those strategic moves. But then the people that are boots on the ground actually doing the work have a better pulse on what the problems are that need to be solved in order for them to get their work done more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, I would. Good point. I would say that that integrator, though, sometimes is not doesn't have the characteristics that I mentioned before in terms of the ownership and the learner. The integrator said, I view as an integrator is here's the playbook. Now go drive it and execute it. They're not looking at, okay, let's make this change or ask why. Now you could have someone that could have a mix of both, but I view that integrator is more like a project manager that is ensuring that milestones are met at certain timelines, holding people accountable and things of that nature, where that intrapreneur is really looking at, again, asking why and trying to figure out things and then drive as well, but I wouldn't tag it as an integrator.
Yeah. Okay. So, you talked about fostering that culture and building that openness for these intrapreneurs to thrive and be able to do their best work. When you're starting a nonprofit or whatever, it's usually founder started. And as they start to grow, that emotion really kind of builds in of like, okay, well, I can't let this go. This is how we do it. It makes it really, there's a lot more emotion in play. So do you have any tips for ways to kind of allow your team to fail, to know that that's okay as you're building people to kind of give up some of the reins? Because that's easier said than done.
I have a smile on my face from ear to ear because that's the evolution of leadership, and we all go through that, and it's probably one of the most challenging things that any leader goes through in terms of delegation and leveraging people around them and allowing them to do that. And again, it's been a focus of mine over my career, as well as any business owners or management leadership people that I engage with. We all have the same challenge. We want to own everything, right? It's we feel that that's what drives our success. However, when you see the light when you see the light, and that light is surrounding yourself with people that you can trust, that again buy into the vision and buy into the culture and buy into what the customer base that you're serving, and allow them to do their job and have that mindset, it's amazing what happens. And COVID really showed that for our organization, because we were 100% remote. RJ couldn't interact or interject when he would overhear a conversation taking place. Okay. And that's most leaders are like that, and business owners, right? They want to be involved in everything. And we had an outstanding year last year, even with everything that was taking place in the world, which I part of me struggles in saying that because so many people had challenging years last year. But what it did is it showed me the leadership team that I've surrounded myself with are outstanding. And it really starts with a hiring process. And that's the most challenging thing. And we actually include in our job descriptions now, when we're hiring someone, the term intrapreneurship. And we'll talk about that. So we're already having those conversations before they come into the organization. And we're trying to identify and say, okay, this person is going to be a core employee, which is going to drive the business, or this one's going to be a functional employee that's going to be more of your implementer, right? It's going to take care of the customer. So that we try and identify that. And I think for a nonprofit or a startup, I actually think that this culture for a startup is more critical for that startup than it is for larger corporations and organizations. Yeah. And I've had these conversations with numerous people where they'll say, no, I think it belongs in larger corporations. And there's no right or wrong, but I come from a family of small business owners. We're a small business. And I think because resources are just so limited and everyone is asked to do so much more with so little, that you have to have this mindset. And if in a smaller organization, if you just identify one person or two people and they come in and influence the organization and help you drive it forward. And the gentleman I spoke about earlier, if they are with you for 2.5 years, that's a great situation, because they're going to build that foundation to help you, especially if you're a startup.
Well, and you mentioned, once you see the light, you realize how great it is. And so with that gentleman and what he was able to do now and the impact he was able to make on your revenue, I mean, some of it at the beginning until you have those results is almost taking a leap of faith and saying, we're going to trust that we've hired the right people to fit the role that we need. And now we have to do our part and allow them to do their part. And kind of back off a little bit. Do you have other examples that you can share of kind of some of the problems that you've seen solved, or kind of some successes you've seen as businesses scale with intrapreneurs on their team?
Sure. Well, just, a couple products, and again, I'm going to reference more bigger organizations that truly have innovation labs and things of that nature. But again, my belief in my coaching about this topic is more simple. It's more about the process improvement and seeking out products or things of that nature. But here are a couple examples. The Post-it note, that was invented accidentally by an intrapreneur. You look at the Toyota Prius, that was an intrapreneur that identified that as a product and is now sold over, 3 million cars.
I drive a Prius.
So exactly. Gmail in Google, that was a intrapreneur that drove that product enhancement. Steve Jobs is probably the most well-known intrapreneur. He was the ultimate intrapreneur, because remember, when he went back into Apple, he actually really started popularizing the term, and then it fell off. But there's, and I could go on and on and on about different examples, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's just really about fostering that type of environment within an organization. And Sammy, it does not take a lot to do that.
Right.
It really doesn't cost anything to foster that environment. And again, there's a lot of different software platforms that we're actually now reviewing as an organization that keeps everything in a consolidated form, and then the entire organization can upvote on things of different products or enhancements, and it really drives the communication, and the people get excited about it. Even if they're not that intrapreneur, they get excited about it because they see the advancement that's taking place within the organization.
Well, and you're then getting more global buy-in from your team, whether it's big or small, right? Because even if it's not something they have to execute on, they're getting a say in kind of the direction and different things that the company is doing.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a gamification piece of it now with the dopamine that there's people that are working on this that are a lot smarter than I am in terms of how to drive that. So, I'm excited about what the future looks like in regards to those tools, back to helping the small to medium-sized business owners.
Yeah. And I think, there's something to be said when you're just starting out, you might have the emotion of the founder not willing to kind of let go of any part of their vision or do things in a way that they didn't initially expect. But then there's once you've been around, even if you're not a giant organization, once you've been around for years, then you have those habits that you've created. So either way, there's challenges in kind of embracing this kind of change. So I guess if you were going to tell people just to get started with something like this, or just to kind of just get going and kind of see what happens, what would your kind of first step be to identify if you have any intrapreneurs on your team, or where would you just kind of get the ball rolling?
Yeah. So if first they have to decide, right? And to your example, if they decided, okay, this is a solution we want to deploy this into our company. There's really there's like 5 easy steps. And if people go to my website, rjgrimshaw.com, they can put in their email, and we'll actually send it's not even an ebook, but we call it an ebook of how to get started. It's really just a quick start jump guide to get them going. And it's not difficult. The most challenging part of it is making that decision. Okay, we want to learn more about this, and we feel that it's value. And then really just identifying in those 5 things, the core skills that I just went through. You can go through any organization, it doesn't matter the size of it, and look for, does someone have that ownership mentality? And is someone a life learner? Is someone, passionate about living? And another thing that I personally do when I'm interviewing candidates, I ask them what their dream job would be. Money was not an issue. What would they get excited to get up and do every single day? And I also preference it and say, don't tell me come to work for Unify, okay? Or don't tell me something that you think I want to hear. And I'll tell them my example. I'll say, my dream job is to be a head coach of a sports team. It doesn't matter if it's a hockey team, which I grew up and played, or a football. I just love coaching. I love to compete. I love just that aspect of it. And I've had actually people start crying when I ask that question, because it hits an emotion of what they really wish they could be doing. And, some people that the interview wasn't going well, or I didn't think they would be a fit, their answer won them into the role. And it goes back to the attributes of, are they a life learner? If someone says, well, I'm not sure what I would do, I might sit and watch Netflix all day. Well, guess what? That's probably not a fit. And it's crazy. That's been an answer before.
That's been an answer.
Yeah. So you can weed out and identify. And as soon as you identify that person or those people, there's a lot of knowledge out there. And that's where we come in and we'll help a company deploy that, because there is a structure to it. And I don't want to scare people, because it's not very difficult to do, but there is a defined structure to deploy it.
Yeah. Well, then head on over and grab that freebie and get started. That's great. So, is there anything else about the intrapreneur? Because I don't know that much about it. I'm learning alongside all of you guys. What else is critical for people to understand as we kind of wrap this up?
Well, at the end of the day, too, to that business owner or nonprofit organization, at the end of the day, even if you deploy this within your company or talk about it in your meetings or talk about it to your leadership team, you will see your discretionary effort of your intrapreneurs go up tremendously, because again, they're passionate. They want to do a great job. And there's truly a difference between an employee and an intrapreneur in terms of their purpose on a daily basis. So even at the end of the day, there's no failing at all to deploy this and start talking about it within your company. So zero risk downside and only upside, because all it takes is one or two people, like I said earlier in my example with that gentleman, to serve our customers, that can be a game changer for you.
Yeah, I think it's really inspirational to think about like those people that you might already have in your company that possess these qualities. That what ideas are they sitting on, because they haven't had it maybe the culture or the open line of communication to be able to bring them to the table. So just like you said, there's no downside, there's only upside. Like what kinds of amazing things might you bring out of your team just by opening up this style of communication?
And here's another example, Sammy, that someone could do if they have on Indeed or LinkedIn or job descriptions and trying to hire for a position, do an A/B test and see the level of quality of the candidates by changing your job description to add in the job title an intrapreneur. We've done that, and it's amazing to see the quality of candidates between the A and the B. Interesting. So just by adding that in terms of a job description that you're seeking an intrapreneur, and some companies that I've coached this to will add a definition at the bottom of the job description with an asterisk so people can go and see what the definition is if they don't understand it or Google it. But you could start with that basic and you'd see the quality of the candidates improve tremendously. So that's just one subtle little change that an organization can make.
That's awesome. Well, this has been great. I am definitely enlightened, and it's really making me think about different conversations that we have with some of the clients, when we're working with them on a one-on-one basis, in ways that they're kind of working through some of their struggles and pain points. So this has been awesome. I always love when I can do a podcast recording interview and learn a ton right alongside all my listeners. So RJ, thank you so much for being on today's episode. If people want to learn more about you, how do they do that?
They can go to rjgrimshaw.com, or they can just Google RJ Grimshaw, my LinkedIn profile, Twitter. I'm very active, as I mentioned earlier, on social media. I respond to all my emails. And even if anyone just has a general question, as you can tell, I love talking about the topic and, evangelizing how beneficial it is to people, and more importantly to companies that serve purposes. So I thank you a lot for being here, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, RJ. And we'll link all of that up in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Sammy.
Okay, so are you inspired? Thank you so much to RJ Grimshaw for joining us. All the links will be in the show notes for you to check out. I just think there's so much opportunity here, and I really hope that you'll embrace it and just allow your team to kind of come up with some solutions and create some space for failure, create some space for trying new things, because you never know what could come of it. And I love that so much. So for now, I hope you subscribe wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on a single episode. And I hope that you are just gearing up to have a great rest of the year. We are almost done with 2021. Oh my goodness. Okay, we'll see you in the next one.